to my webinar. So my name's Sophia, if you don't know me. So I'm a specialist therapist and coach in all things, essentially social presence, which really is another way of saying being alive, but essentially social presence, all things social anxiety, communication, showing up, being visible, all of these things, essentially with the end goal of confidence. So today's webinar is focused on something that comes up a lot in sessions and just in conversation, on how to deal with difficult people and essentially then how to communicate assertively. So we're going to be going through essentially what difficult people are, what it's really about, and communication styles and what you can then do. So should be under an hour, and just to say, I know it's live but I can't see the comments, so do feel free to engage in there, but I won't be able to live reply because it means I can't run through the webinar. I'm quite a visual person, so I'm actually going to be drawing this out for you, which is why we're on this sort of maths looking website, because I think that's sometimes the best way to see things rather than just talking about them. So I really hope you find it useful. So to start off with, when we're thinking about a difficult person, a lot of us can feel when we're in the presence of a difficult person, but sometimes it's quite hard to define. So when I'm talking about a difficult person today, essentially, I'm describing somebody that you personally find to be difficult or hard to communicate with because their communication style is either quite rude, quite aggressive, they're not really saying what they're meaning, all of these things. There's almost an objective difficulty there. Now, we will be talking about people who are sort of, we might consider them to be difficult people in some way for whatever reason, but also on the flip side, it's not just about people who are difficult. Sometimes our loved ones and close friends can become difficult people to communicate with when we're having a conversation about something challenging. So this is not to put people in blankets of they're difficult and they're not, because really we can all become difficult people if we're really pushed into a corner on something challenging. So these skills are really for you. You can take across the board to any conversation that you find challenging as a topic, or the person themselves is somehow challenging to you. The second thing to say is that there might be some people who are purposefully being aggressive or whatever in their communication, but sometimes when we're talking about quote unquote difficult people, they might not actually be trying to be difficult. They might just be being themselves, and it's our perception of them that is making them seem difficult. So for example, somebody might have naturally not that much facial expression, like they just don't show a lot of expression on their face, and when you're communicating with them about something quite important, that lack of expression back is making you feel like they're being a difficult person, but actually they're just being themselves. It's your perception of that is making you think they're difficult. So this webinar is really going to focus on situations where like the person is kind of objectively displaying difficult behavior from what you can truly see, but you can still take these skills and use it with people that you struggle to communicate with anyway, because fundamentally we all have different communication styles based on culture, upbringing, neurodiversity, everything like this. And the skills we look at today is kind of just rising above all of these things as to how do we communicate in a way that is healthy and good with people who are difficult, but also really you could use it with anyone, particularly when you don't have the same communication style, because there is really no right way of being. So this is more about how you navigate situations where communication has become difficult. Yeah, so let's get started. The first thing to also say, I'm just going to make my head a bit smaller, is that a lot of the time, and you will see this as we move through this webinar, that people who are being difficult, it's often not actually about you. So often when people are communicating in a difficult way, it's normally something to do with them, what's coming up for them. You might be reminding them of something. They might have unprocessed trauma that even they're not aware of, that you are resurfacing for them in some way, or the topic is, and it's not actually about you. And so separating yourself from that can be very, very helpful to think about how I'm going to reply, or how you're going to reply. And actually, I'll come back big just for this story. So an example of that is I was actually in Waitrose because I was moving house, and I wanted to borrow some of those like big cardboard boxes because we'd run out of moving boxes. And I don't know if this isn't a thing anymore, but back in the day you could go to supermarkets and take their big boxes because they weren't doing anything with them and use them for yourself. Anyway, went into Waitrose, asked a store assistant if they had any, and he said, oh, there's some near the entrance that you can take. So I go to the entrance and I see this pile of boxes, but it looks like something's in them. So I was like, oh, maybe there's some rubbish in them. I'll just take it out. So I begin to open the box and this security guard comes flying over at me, screaming at me, get your hands off that. Like, what are you doing? I'm going to call the police, la, 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 la. And obviously I am like frozen and also like humiliated because everyone's looking at me like I'm some thief. And this is inner London. So like people stealing things isn't, you know, an anomaly, let's say. And I was like, what is this about? And I was trying to explain to him, no, I'm just trying to take the cardboard box. But he was screaming and shouting so much. And he was shouting, get away from those things. So I had to say, can you please calm down? Like, sir, can you please calm down? But I'm almost in tears, not because I'm upset, but because when I'm startled, I tend to get like tears. It's more from feeling overwhelmed than upset. And can you please calm down? Can you please calm down? And finally he calms down and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, your colleague just said I can take boxes from the entrance here because I'm moving house. And he was like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, but that is what your colleague said. That is all I'm doing. I'm not trying to steal anything. And he was like, okay. And then we got into a bit of an awkward silence. And then he said, sorry, last week somebody came in and stole all of the, like, there's sort of like delivery groceries near the front of the shop. Somebody came in and stole all of them and I was on duty and I got blamed because I didn't stop it. And now I'm hyper alert, like, for anyone touching stuff because we lost thousands of pounds. Now, obviously that doesn't justify him shouting at me, but what it is a lesson in is often it's not about you. I said, that's fine, I understand. And to be honest, I felt a lot of empathy for him because this is an area of London where that stuff happens a lot, and to expect one person to be able to stop it is ridiculous. And clearly he was somewhat traumatized by the experience, and I don't know what support had been provided or whatever, but he was still very hyper alert to the same thing happening. Now, do I forgive him for shouting at me? Yes. Was it great? No. Was I humiliated? Absolutely yes. I just left the shop. But I say this story just to highlight, I was fortunate enough to find out it wasn't really about me. But in most conversations, you won't ever find that out, but it is often the truth. So just to hold it in mind, I was just lucky that he actually communicated it to me. Okay. Saying that, let's get into style of communication, and actually we'll start with him. So when we think of communication as a spectrum, if we got our line here, on one end of the spectrum, let me just make this a bit bigger. There we go, and I'll put myself up here. At one end of the spectrum, we have aggressive. So that essentially was that security guard. Often we think of aggressive like shouting, maybe dominant sort of body language, really quite intense eye contact, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And particularly because that is quite a Western understanding of our cultural norms, because I'm speaking from a Western perspective myself of what aggressiveness might mean. Yes, it can be helpful to understand it might be aggressive body language, but it's not always. Now, I'll go into this a little bit more. On the other end of the spectrum is passive communication. So we can see this when we can see that people are kind of shut down, not really saying much, just saying yes. Maybe they don't say anything at all. Body language might be quite like crossed arms, closed off, looking away. So these are quite the obvious body language signs that we look for when we're assessing somebody and our own communication. But what is actually the difference? So when we think about needs, in aggression, in the moment, aggressive communication has the underlying motivator that my needs are more important than yours. Okay, so just let you sit with that for a moment. Whereas passive is your needs are more important than mine. Okay. Now, we don't often think about this, but generally when we are communicating with somebody who's quite challenging as a communicator, let's say they're aggressive. So let's give an example. Your boss is demanding, you better have this ready for me by 7 p.m. today. You know that you can't do that without cancelling on your friends, missing dinner, etc., etc. But because they are so aggressive, you resort to being passive. You decide, you know what, their need or the company's need is more important than mine. I agree. You don't stand up for yourself. That is an example of somebody being aggressive and pushing you into passive. Now, there's also a nervous system response to this. So when we think about the nervous system, and what I mean by that, if you're new to kind of nervous system work, is essentially our biological wiring. So you know the nervous system when you look at your life. So let's say you're standing on the street and a fast car comes flying down the road. You've got a few choices that you often don't think about, but your nervous system will make you do. You will either run away in case it's going to hit you. You might freeze in place because you're so shocked and it might feel better to stand in place. You might duck, or you might look around for an escape. All of these things happen without your conscious awareness, because this is your nervous system, and aka your fight or flight system, activating to keep you safe. Okay, and it's really helpful in these moments because it will make you do something. And even if you do run away from the car, and even though the car goes past and it wasn't going to hit you anyway, it's still helpful that you reacted, just in case, for your safety. The problem is, humans are social creatures. We have caveman brains that evolved when the group, being part of a caveman tribe, is what kept you and me and us safe. You needed to belong to the tribe to have access to food, water, safety, everything like that. So this system that activates on life and death events, like fast cars, or a burning hot stove, when your hand goes and you ricochet back, it activates on social dynamics too, because we evolved to survive as a group. Now, this isn't as relevant for us anymore, though it's somewhat still relevant. But this is the same biological wiring. So when you're communicating with people, particularly people who are difficult communicators, this same response can come up. And I'm just going to put this somewhere to the side so you've got it, because we tend to have different nervous system responses. We have fight. So that's, obviously I'm not talking about violence, but let's say if somebody's being aggressive to you, maybe you be aggressive back. I'm not saying you violently attack them, but they say something rude to you and your immediate thing is to say something rude back. You are fighting. We've got flight, which is to just leave, get out of that situation. So you have an argument with your partner and you think, I can't do this, and you just walk out of the room. You are not engaging. Flight. You've got freeze, which is where you get kind of stuck. You kind of put on the spot, like I don't know what to say, or for some people this might feel a little bit like zoning out, like you're not even having any thoughts in the moment, which is really normal. And one that people tend to talk about more a little bit is fawn. And this is where you essentially stay in the situation, but you give in, you fawn to somebody else's needs to basically be liked. You may relate to some of these in different situations. We all have different ones, and really importantly, a lot of these, they're basically out of your control. Your nervous system response is going to happen no matter what, but you can become aware of it and then begin to respond how you want. So I personally am a flighty person. In difficult conversations, I just want to leave. Everything in my body is like, get out of here, go somewhere else, walk out, take some time out, just get out of here. Now, sometimes that is helpful when you're in a toxic dynamic, but if you're actually just in a difficult conversation, actually, if you leave, you can sometimes become the difficult person. So we're going to talk a little bit more about nervous system responses as we go along, but I'm just going to put these here because we can't separate them from communication because we are social creatures. So coming back to the idea of the caveman, if you're outcasted from the group, in a caveman life, that means no access to food, maybe water, housing, protection, you are most likely going to die. So our brain is going to alarm when it feels like it's having a difficult social connection in some way, and that is normal. You are not being too sensitive, which is what I hear a lot of people say. Right, I've gone on a side journey there, but I thought it would be helpful. So where is the middle ground then? So the middle ground is assertiveness. So when we think about needs, with assertiveness, it's our needs are of equal importance, okay? So I'll go through a little bit of an example so that we can see the difference. So let's say my neighbor is blasting music at 1 a.m. on the morning, 1 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday night, so it is the weekend. This is a real situation I've been in. I can feel my nervous system just activating, as I say. And actually, this one doesn't cause me to flight. This one causes me to fight. Everything in me, when that happens, just wants to go and like scream at their door. Like, what are you doing? But that wouldn't be helpful. Anyway, I've already gone into it. So let's say the example is the loud neighbor. Let me put this on here. So neighbor playing music loud at 1 a.m. on weekend. Okay. Now, for a lot of us, we're going to go into an immediate nervous system response. Like one person, mine is flight, like I want to go around there and give them a piece of my mind kind of thing. My partner is kind of less bothered. He's like, oh, let's just sleep it off. Like, as long as I can't hear it over headphones, like, I'll just sleep. So it's kind of a not caring, but it might also be a fawn. Like, I don't really want to get into difficult communication. Like, I'll put my earplugs in to not hear it kind of thing. And some people will think, oh my God, this is so annoying, but there's no way on earth I'm going around there. Like, I feel way too scared. And I think we can use this as an example of a difficult person, right? Like, this is somebody not really caring about the impact on other people, or they're just not thinking, or they have no idea. And this is the thing, we don't want to assume people are difficult, even though their behavior is causing us a problem. So the aggressive response, if my needs are more important than theirs, so if my need for sleep at 1 a.m. is more important than theirs, the first thing I'm going to do is go around, bang on the door, and say, shut up, basically. Okay. Now, you might be thinking, you've got every right to do that at 1 a.m. That might be true, but is this likely to get me what I want? Probably not, because from their side, I am going to come across aggressive, and I am. I'm saying my needs are more important than yours. Yes, it's 1 a.m., but it's also a weekend. It's not very sociable to do this, but it's not like it's a Wednesday. Right. Passive, do nothing. Try sleep. Maybe put earplugs in and drown it out, even though you know that you are not going to sleep. So what's the assertive response here? So an assertive response might be going around, knocking on door, and having a discussion. And this discussion really needs to highlight that our needs are of equal importance. So I'll put an example here of something that I might say that is really getting to the sense of our needs are of equal importance. So I might say, like, after hi, I'm your neighbor, etc., etc. I know you're having fun, okay, with your friends, let's say. So I recognize that's their need, okay? There is a reason they're doing this. They're not just doing it for any reason. Oh, I don't like the shape of this box. I know you're having fun with your friends, but I can't sleep. Would you mind turning it down? Okay. Now this is important because I'm not asking them to turn it off. I'm asking them to turn it down, which suggests I recognize you have this need to play music at 1 a.m. I don't agree, wouldn't do it myself, but I recognize that that's what you want to do. This is what I want to do. I want to sleep. Here's a suggestion that meets both of our needs. Now, this is more likely to go well than option over here, just banging on the door, because if you're aggressive, you're more likely to get aggression back. And two, this one doesn't get me, if I'm passive, I'm not getting anything I want. Now, I would probably have a nervous system response. I'd probably feel quite anxious doing this because, well, it's just, you're having to be assertive. This is an assertive response, and that's normal. But it doesn't mean that you're wrong or that you should be passive, because your needs are important. Now, if they say yes, great. I can just go back to my flat and situation is over. But what if they say no? What if they say something aggressive? Like they say, no, just get over it. It's the weekend, like live a little. Oof. That would get under my skin. That would really get under my skin. Okay, then this is a difficult person now, right? I think we can say objectively. What we tend to do when somebody does that is to move into aggressive. They have said something essentially rude or offensive to us, and so we start to say, who the hell do you think you are? Turn it the hell down. We start making threats. I'm going to call the police, blah, blah, blah. again, this is just going to escalate the situation. Sometimes you might get your way, but actually we know through lots of research that the closer you can remain to being assertive, the more likely you are to get what you want. So let's say they say, no, can you just live a little? Okay. What I want to do is try and stay assertive. So I'd say, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but actually, no, I really need to sleep. I have an early appointment in the morning, so I need to go to sleep. So I'm just reasserting my need, but I'm saying I understand what you're saying. And they might say, oh, well, we're going to be done in like an hour. Is that okay? It's weighing up here how much you care. For me, no, it's not okay. It's 1 a.m. in the morning. And I might say I appreciate the offer, but I really need to sleep now. I've already been awake for an hour. Can you turn it down? So I'm repeating my need. Now, let's just say in this situation that finally they do turn it down. Okay, great. I can go to bed. Wasn't a nice conversation, but I remained assertive. Okay, and this is what often happens with difficult people, is that they will become aggressive, and the more someone's aggressive, it inadvertently pushes you to be passive and just give up, or think, you know what, their needs are more important. So you need to hold true to as much as you can. It might be helpful to visualize this kind of line in your head, this scale. How can I come as close to assertiveness as I can in this moment in the way I communicate? Now, I've been using empathetic statements, which is essentially this statement here, which first recognizes their need, but then says my need. Some people are just not great people. And so doing this isn't going to get you anywhere. So when that happens, you need to sometimes resort to repetitive assertiveness, which is where you just keep repeating your needs. So for example, they say, can we turn it down in an hour? I say, no, I need you to turn it down now. Can we turn it down in half an hour? No, I need you to turn it down now. Oh, but we're really having fun. I know, but I need you to turn it down now. What about if we invite you? No, thank you. I need you to turn it down now. Essentially, you become a broken record. You just keep repeating your need. Is it annoying? Yes. However, is it assertive? Also, yes. You're not being passive, you're not giving up, and you're not shouting your need or demanding something. You just keep repeating your need till they either say a suggestion that you're actually willing to compromise on and meet in the middle, or basically till you get what you want, which often is likely with that technique because people just can see that you mean business and you're not going to give up. Now, I'm going to attach a worksheet to the webinar of different techniques, because I'm talking about use this communication technique, and I'm not going to go through it too much here on the webinar, but I will attach a worksheet with different kind of example statements that you can use if you wanted. But remember, these are just based on my norms. I come from a Western background. In different countries, different cultures, assertiveness could be seen as aggressive, or passiveness might be seen as more appropriate. Whatever it is, you need to take it with a pinch of salt and adapt it to your unique situation and dynamic. Now, there's also the important that there's almost become a narrative, I think, in social media advice and things like this, that, you know, be a boundary queen, hold your boundaries, which is essentially to be assertive and never give in. And that can be true sometimes, but your relationships might suffer. Okay, so we do want to be assertive, but it's also okay to be passive when you are making a conscious choice to do so. So just going to give a really basic example, but like, let's say me and my partner are both hungry and there's one banana left in the kitchen. Okay, assertiveness is to debate who gets to have the banana, and essentially we end up halving it. But you know, I care for my partner, I love him, etc., etc. It might make me feel good and be an authentic choice for me to say, you know what, you have the banana, I'll go without. Okay, that is not being forced into being passive. That is a conscious choice that I'm making because I actually want to prioritize their needs in that moment, and I'm not at a disadvantage. It's something I'm making from a place of authority. It's not the opposite situation where he's demanding that it's his and I have to go hungry. Now that's being pushed into a passive position without any choice. So it's okay to be passive when you need to be. But we know from research that as much as you can, generally, the closer you can stay to assertiveness, the more you're likely to get what you want. Now, people often ask me, but where does passive aggressiveness come into this? So passive aggressiveness is essentially, my needs is where you think my needs are important, but I won't communicate them, / I expect you to know. Okay, this is passive aggressiveness. There are other ways to define it, but essentially it is to have the my needs are more important, but not telling anybody that you know about them. Now, a lot of the time passive aggressiveness comes up from, I should put this here actually, it comes up from normally someone feeling unable to be assertive because they're afraid of the consequences, but they don't want to be aggressive. So they basically don't say anything, but really their desire is this one. They need their needs to be met in that moment, and they think they're important, but they expect you to know it. And passive aggressiveness is really hard to communicate with. Often, when you're with someone who's communicating passive aggressively, you might resort to aggression. You might resort to passive aggression, or you might resort to passiveness, like, oh, you know what, you clearly want that last banana, just take it, okay? What you want to do is try, if you can, and stay assertive. Now, if you call someone passive aggressive, they might respond badly. They probably will respond badly. What we want to do, again, is recognize their needs. So if somebody is saying something passive aggressive, like let's go back to the party example, like let's say, okay, they say, oh, you know, fine, I'll turn it down. And they're like, look really annoyed and like huffing and puffing. And it's like, okay, well, they're saying that they'll do it, but they clearly don't want to and don't think it's the right idea. And do I believe that they'll turn it down? Not sure. Okay, I might say something like, I can see that you're saying it, but it seems like it's a problem for you. Can we talk about it a little bit more? That is saying to that person, our needs are of equal importance, and giving them an opportunity to express what they actually mean. Now, if they don't take you up on it, again, that's going to be quite difficult, and you're dealing with a difficult communicator. Try and stay assertive as much as you can. Passive aggressiveness is often not about you. It's often about either growing up in an environment where people communicated like that, growing up with people who, when you did communicate their needs, they weren't honored, or you were shut down. Passive aggressiveness, it's not, I'm not saying you should accept it, but it often isn't about you. It's often a waste. It's often it's sort of a nervous system response to how someone learned to communicate their needs, because maybe that's how they were met, or all sorts of things. But whatever it is, it's not often about you. In the same way aggressiveness isn't sometimes, and neither is passiveness. So try to separate it from yourself and just remain assertive, because the more someone thinks that you can see their needs, the more likely it is to go well. And actually, I was reading a really interesting piece of research. One second, my throat's getting a bit dry. Okay, I was reading a really interesting piece of research the other day that you can display, you know, you can have a conversation with somebody and not really make good eye contact, you know, body language might be a bit off, you can look away from them, all of these things. People don't actually care. They come away from the conversation feeling good about it if they believe that you truly had their needs held with good intention, that you truly cared about their needs. Doesn't mean you agree with their needs at all, but you truly cared about them. That was seen as the most important predictor of good communication, regardless of body language, regardless of anything. And that proves what we already know, that assertiveness and equal awareness of needs is important. And this does not equate to agreeing with them, okay? I don't agree with the music at 1 a.m., but I can still remain understanding, and people are so much more likely to communicate well with you if they feel that you can see their needs. And often a lot of people, it can be a bit jarring for them, because a lot of people don't communicate like this, one, and often people who do communicate in a difficult way maybe grew up in environments where their needs weren't honored, and they've learned, unfortunately, to be aggressive is the only way to get what they want, or to be difficult. And when you start saying, hey, I see your needs, it can be a bit confusing for them. So, hold in mind, it might be quite new for whoever you're communicating with. The flip side of this is that we might be communicating with people who are being assertive, but we are perceiving it as aggressive. And therefore we're perceiving them as a difficult person when they're actually not. They're just being assertive. So if I think of an example, interesting example. I mean, I guess I don't tend to view people in this way anymore, but I used to be very sensitive when people would demand their needs, and I would take it as aggressive when it really wasn't. But let's say, for example, okay, let's just go back to the banana example because it's so basic. Of me and my partner, there's one banana left in the kitchen. We're both starving and we can't be bothered to go to the shop. Okay, if my partner says, I know you're hungry, but I am absolutely starving because I haven't had breakfast. Can I have it? Okay, that is assertive. It's recognizing my need. It's asking his need, and it's not going and doing it. It's asking me first. Aggressive would be going and doing it and not asking me at all. But if we're really hungry as well, we might take this as somebody seeing their needs as more important than ours, and we might respond with aggression like, well, I don't care, that's your fault, you didn't have breakfast, la la la, when actually they were recognizing both needs and then putting forward a suggestion. They didn't go and do it. So really hold in mind, when you're perceiving somebody as difficult, are they actually being aggressive or passive aggressive or any of these things, or actually are they being assertive and we're responding by seeing that as difficult when actually they're not being? We might not agree, again, like, okay, well, you should have had breakfast, it's not really my problem. We might not agree, but that doesn't mean they're being aggressive. So try to hold this spectrum in mind, because most human communication, oh no, I've messed up my line. There we are. Most human communication falls into this spectrum. Now I'm going to just scroll up and take this off because it's confusing. And I want to talk a little bit about vulnerability, because we don't talk much about this. What shape do I want? I want this shape. So often, if you've ever watched anything with Brene Brown, who talks a lot about the power of vulnerability, when you are vulnerable with other people, not only are you more likely to feel connected, but you're also more likely to be seen for what you're truly communicating. Even if it goes wrong, that's helpful information for you, that those people don't respect your vulnerability, etc. Or, someone wasn't able to be there for you in your way. Now, people think that, wait, sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong thing. Here we go. So assertiveness is actually being vulnerable. It's saying, hey, I see what your needs are and these are mine. I'm not sure what to do, so let's work together. You are really stepping in to a place of vulnerability that is very helpful in communication. Now, for a lot of us, we don't want to be vulnerable, okay? When we come back to this nervous system response up here, being vulnerable can feel scary, it can feel exposing, it can feel risky. So it's understandable that we avoid it. So we might just not be vulnerable, go to aggressiveness, like demand that our needs are met, because aggressiveness is to not be vulnerable. It is to force your needs through and therefore not allow anyone to see any vulnerability. It's to cover that up. And so is passiveness, okay? If we just shut down and don't say what we want, we are not being vulnerable. We are hiding our true needs and putting someone above us with the aim to not make ourselves feel vulnerable. So yes, their needs are more important than ours, but normally, well, not normally, but often it's because we don't want to be vulnerable. So we put other people first because we worry. Some fears that might come up here is, well, if I say what I want, other people might reject me. If I say what I want, people might get angry. If I say what I want, people might, think I'm weird. That's a vulnerable position to be in. So we don't do it. We protect ourselves. And I think this is when what I'm kind of getting at when I say that it's not often about you. Even though I don't agree with aggressive communication, it has protective intent. That doesn't mean that it's right, but it is just another way of protecting oneself from vulnerability, just like passiveness is. It's just that aggressiveness tends to, have more negative consequences. And just to be clear, when I say aggressiveness, I'm not talking about violence. Violence is a whole different ballgame that just isn't acceptable in any format. I'm talking about aggressive, demanding communicators. Now, when you start viewing aggressive communicators as people who are trying to protect themselves, doesn't mean that they are right, but when you start viewing it through this, it gives you a bit of space to step back. This isn't about me. For some reason, they are protecting themselves. Like if I go back to my Waitrose security guard, he was just protecting himself. He did not want to be humiliated again. He did not want to be blamed again by his work. So he started shouting at me, saying, his need of protecting that thing is more important than what I was doing, etc. All of these things. It was protective. Okay, it doesn't mean that it was right. Definitely not. But it's often protective. He did not want to be vulnerable. And everything in me, because I was embarrassed, wanted to start shouting back and protect myself in this way, like, who the hell are you to shout at me? But I knew that wasn't going to help, and that's why I just said, hey, what is going on? Can you stop shouting? Calm down. What is the problem? Okay, so that is telling you, tell me your need. Tell me your need. Also, it's not the way a thief responds, so I think from that he understood, wait a second, I might have misjudged this situation. So assertiveness as a result, though, takes time to feel comfortable with. You can't just suddenly be really vulnerable in assertiveness and feel comfortable with it. It will take time, and that's okay. And you don't have to be right here. You can see this as a spectrum, and just try to bring yourself as close to assertiveness as you can when you're communicating, and over time you will feel more safe and grounded being vulnerable. Now, the beauty of this is, even though you're vulnerable, it might go wrong. Let's say I've been vulnerable with my neighbor. I'm saying, hey, look, I get it, but I want to go to sleep. They might, start swearing at me and basically say, well, stuff you, we're doing this anyway, and slam the door in my face. Okay, that's my vulnerability. I've been vulnerable and it's been thrown back in my face, but that's useful information. Why? Because now I know what truly happens when I really put myself out there with this person, and that tells me, one, maybe I want to move house. Two, maybe I want to make a formal complaint. Three, it tells me a lot about the nature of that person. It gives you helpful information. It essentially allows people to show you who they truly are, and then you can make a decision based off that information. Whereas if I'm aggressive, okay, they might be aggressive back, but who knows if they would have actually been that way if I'd been assertive. And if I'm passive, I'll never know. And then they'll just keep doing it. So vulnerability is really, really important. And actually, oh my gosh, saying this and thinking about a situation I really had. So in where I live at the moment, during about a 3-month period, our neighbor was doing really severe building work, and there was a constant drill in the wall all day. I've never felt so close to losing my mind. And finally in the evening it would stop, because they can't build in the evening. And it got to 7 p.m. and we heard blasting music from our downstairs neighbor, and they were having a party. Now, having a party on a Friday night in London at 7 p.m. is, to be honest, completely reasonable. It's not great, it's completely reasonable. But because I have been so wound up all day, sorry, the internet just froze there. So as I was saying, so they had been drilling all day, and then our other neighbour started this music. And by the way, they couldn't hear the drill all day, so they didn't know that this had been happening. And the moment I heard it, I just cracked. Anyone who's been subject to noise pollution for like extensive periods of time knows that it's like very, very intense, and you go a bit crazy. I cracked, I went down there, I was aggressive. Like, I'm not proud of it. Like, I knocked on the door, the girl came out, and I was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is a residential building. I mean, obviously she was completely shocked, because for her this had come out of nowhere, whereas I had been building up all day. Like, I was like, why didn't you tell us? Like, you literally live next door, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, she was actually really kind. She was like, I'm so sorry. Like, we didn't know you'd be able to hear. Like, I'll turn it down, all of these things. And I came back upstairs and I was really embarrassed, because I did not want to communicate that way. And that is not a good way to, one, speak to someone. Two, she had no idea. And three, I could have got what I wanted without being like that. And so I actually, the next day, went to apologize and said, look, I'm really sorry, and this is me being vulnerable. We had been driven insane all week by the drill from next door, and then the moment we got some relief, your music started and I completely projected it onto you, and I am really sorry, like that was not fair. And she was like, oh, it's completely okay, but thanks so much for explaining. And this is the thing about vulnerability, like that's how people truly understand you. But to her, I was a difficult person in that moment. I really was. So hold this in mind when you're on the receiving end of difficult or aggressive communicators. It's just often not about you. Okay, so let me zoom out so we can see this a little bit more. Now, the final thing I wanted to say is that if you're particularly socially anxious, or you might identify as a people pleaser, or any of these things, we tend to be passive communicators because it feels safer. You know, let other people get their way, people please, all of these things. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but this is what tends to happen, which means you tend to not get your needs met as frequently as other people get them met. Now, what happens as a result is this can build up into resentment because you are constantly doing things for other people or putting them first. So what happens when, let's say you've been, prioritizing other people's needs for ages, and then you say to, let's say, your partner, hey, can you grab me milk on the way home? And they say, oh, I actually can't, like I'm not passing the shop. Because you have been passive for so long, sometimes what can happen is you swing into aggressiveness because your needs have now become more important because they have been so unmet for so long. And maybe you start like shouting or saying like, oh, forgot, like you start saying mean things, or like, just do it, like I do so much for you, etc. And for them, they might be completely blindsided. Now, this is really understandable. It's, it's not ideal, but it's understandable because when you are generally quite passive, when you really need your needs to be met, it will be normal that you swing into aggressiveness because you're kind of on the final straw. And this is why working on becoming assertive and finding your middle ground is going to help your relationships as well, so that you're not swinging so back and forth. So yeah, this is the spectrum of communication. I think I'll finish with one final example, and yeah, then I hope you found it helpful, and I will put the sheets below. So let's go for a different example. Let's go for something a little bit more difficult. So we go example, boss reviewing my KPIs, key performance indicators, says I need to work harder, okay? And their tone is aggressive, like it's demanding, it's not polite, they're saying why, like I need you to do better, etc., etc. Okay, my position is that I can't work harder because I would have to work longer hours. There is too much work, okay? This is a really difficult situation to be in, and so some of us might go aggressive, like basically just being demanding what's unreasonable, etc., etc. I'm not doing that, which is going to put us in a very difficult communication with them. We might be passive and accept it, which means we're going to end up working till late at night. So just an example, assertive response might be something like, I know my KPIs need to be better, and I know that they're important for you, because holding in mind your boss is evaluated on their line reports KPIs. So I know my KPIs are important for you, but I really cannot meet them without working excessive working hours, which I am not able to do. That's the end of my sentence. I'm not putting a suggestion there. I'm saying I get it. I see why you're saying this, and this is no matter their communication style. But this is why I'm struggling to meet that. And I'm putting it back to them. I see their needs. These are my needs. They will then need to decide what to say next. They might say something aggressive like, well, you need to figure it out. I might say, yeah, I can see that, but how? And we're just remaining as close as we can to the assertive state. Because when we're in very difficult, high-stakes situations, we're likely to swing around all over here, and as much as you can, try stay assertive, because this is more likely where you're going to get what you want / develop a better working relationship with whoever it is. And if they are just a difficult person, then it's just more likely to get you what you want. And this doesn't mean never conceding, okay? This might be that your boss says, okay, well, eventually you get to a place where they say, well, we need you to meet this, so could we take away this task from you, even though I know it's very important to you so you can meet the KPIs? Okay, that's not ideal for you. It's taking away work that you love to meet a KPI that maybe you don't really even think is important. But is it close? Is it better? Is it getting you what you want compared to whatever the alternative is, like quitting or, I don't know, raising an HR complaint? Because all of these are options, but thinking about what really is my ideal outcome here and using assertive communication to get you as close as you can to it. And remember, it's going to be normal to feel vulnerable. It's going to be normal to feel anxious. All of that means you're doing it right. So I really hope you found that helpful. Do leave me comments with any questions. I will respond to them. And yeah, feel free if you want to connect. I'll put my website, Instagram, TikTok, etc. all in the bio. And I really hope you found it useful. Hi guys, and welcome to